Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Katherine Sharkey. I am Assistant Dean for Women in Medicine and Science at Brown, and it is my pleasure to be hosting this event with Dr. Carol Landau this evening. We are so happy to have her here to talk about her book, Mood Prep 101. And it's my pleasure to introduce Carol to all of you. She's been a really good friend to me and colleague over the years. And so we're really excited tonight to do this conversation about preventing depression and anxiety in college-bound teens. So first, let me just kick off, and Carol, I'm going to tell them all a little bit about you. Okay. Professor Carol Landau is a clinical professor of psychiatry and human behavior at the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University and a consulting clinical psychologist. She co-directs the psychology and psychiatry in primary care in the Department of Medicine program. She has written 3 previous books. She is a member of the Senior Advisory Council for the Office of Women in Medicine and Science at Brown, which is how I've gotten to know Carol over the years. Her academic career began at Brown University, where she got an undergraduate degree in American civilization, and then she received her doctorate at the University of Rhode Island in psychology and completed her psychology residency at Brown Medical School. She then joined the faculty at the Brown Medical School in the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior, and she was chair of clinical appointments, reappointments, and the promotions committee. She also has an independent practice here in Rhode Island in consultation and psychotherapy. Carol is a compassionate therapist. She is a delightful friend. She is a mentor to so many. And I know we're all excited, Carol, to have you tell us how to raise our teenagers. I'm the token parent, hostess and parent. So I know you wanted to offer some thanks for this program first. Shall I read them?
Yeah.
So we're really excited and grateful to everybody that helped us put this program together. So we want to acknowledge Julie Haynes, who is the Advancement Events Manager in Biomedicine at Brown, Laura Smith, the Parents Liaison, Amana Mahmood, who is the liaison to the Brown Alumni Clubs, Tova Beiser from the Brown Bookstore, where you can buy Dr. Landau's book at the Brown Bookstore. Mike Spar and Jake LaFawn from Brown Media Services, who are hopefully going to let Carol and I zoom through this without any technical difficulties. And our dear friend, Chris Cambra, from Director of Biomed Communications, a very valued colleague who we always love working with. So thanks to all these people for getting this together for us tonight. And now, Carol, I'm going to just launch in with a question about why did you write this book? Tell us why now and what you were thinking about when you said the world needs this as their next book.
Well, I want to do that, but I also want to say hello to the audience because thanks to that list of people, we have quite a geographic, diverse group of people from all over the country. And as Dr. Sharkey tweeted last week, she is my tweet mentor, by the way, and now I'll call her Katie, because we want to have a conversation. Not only do we have this growing level of anxiety and depression as parents that we're struggling with our teens, then you add the COVID-19 pandemic, and if that wasn't enough, why not throw in a violent insurrection last week? So not to be flip about it, this is a very difficult time for all of us. So what I'm hoping for is this evening, we'll be able to share some helpful tips and have good questions and at the end of the session. To tell you a little bit more about the situation we're in, I wanted to mention that I live in a high-rise condominium that has elevators. And Rhode Island, like many states, is not in very good shape with respect to COVID. So our association mandated that there can only be one family member per elevator. This has led to some interesting verbal and nonverbal behavior when the elevator door opens. Some people shrug, most people say hi, some people do both. But yesterday I had a different experience. This time when the elevator opened, I saw a man I've met, but I don't really know, and he's usually quiet and a bit absent-minded. But this time he looked me directly in the eye and said, "Someday we'll be together," which I don't know, I just thought that was hilarious and sweet. And I don't think he knows that that was a hit song by Diana Ross. Nonetheless, what I want to say to all of us is that someday we will be together. And that brings me to why did I write the book? Well, one reason is as a parent, although I have no children at home now, but from my work, I know that parents are just completely confused about what to do in this stage. And when I was sitting with my clients, once I was sitting with a college student, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could retrofit this person, go back and get some better skills? Because in terms of my experience, most of the students I see are very well prepared academically, but not so much psychologically. And so that led me to thinking about the building blocks of adolescence and really of childhood that could help prevent depression and anxiety. And we know this is important just briefly because 1 out of 3 teens has a major depressive episode at any time, and a whopping number of over 33% of teenage girls, and about 1/3 of teens have some sort of anxiety disorder. So combining my experience both with students and the parents who are struggling, and this really an epidemic that has been underappreciated. And now we have a pandemic on top of that. So that's kind of what happened. And then I have my family and my Brown community that helped me get it done.
Yeah. And it's so great. And there are so many great tips in it. And I really think it's interesting, a choice to help the parents, because I feel like when my kids, so I have disclosure, I have a freshman in high school. I have 2 14-year-old boys, a freshman and a junior in high school. And when they were little, I had a million books, what to expect when you're expecting and all of this stuff, and how to talk so children will listen and all of this. I don't have the one called what to expect when you don't know what to expect.
Right.
So, right. So what, the parents are your focus in this book. And I think there are reasons behind that. Yes.
Yeah, because not only is everybody really at sea, especially right now when the uncertainty is high, but in addition, I think parents underappreciate how much power they have and really how much good they can do for their kids if they own some of the things that they're probably doing well, like communication. But the other reason it's extremely important to help parents help their teens is that in addition to anxiety and depression, 50% of all mental health disorders start in teenagers. So a whole chunk of the book we won't talk about now is about early identification, getting over stigma, and getting help if you need it, because we need to intervene early and often.
Right. And I can speak to that so I practice sleep medicine. And in fact, Carol, you and I talked earlier this week about stigma and getting help, and how I think when people are young and they seek psychiatric or psychological or help or counseling, they really think of that as this life-defining moment, when they saw a psychologist or, and really the point of this is to have it be a blip where you tack the boat in a different direction and you use a professional just like you would if you had appendicitis. And yet I feel sometimes, even with people who have known me a long time or trust me a lot, that it really, their shame over it
It's a hard
is sometimes really hard to overcome. And so then you sprinkle a little anxious parent. And I think then there's a cohort problem too, where maybe if generationally people weren't comfortable talking about psychological or psychiatric stuff, and then the kids don't want to disappoint the parents, and the parents don't want to think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my baby? So it really can spiral. And which I think brings us to, one of the skills we talked about when we were planning this, and I think you mentioned it a little bit ago. There's so much going on in the world right now, right? And in addition to the pandemic and political strife, we have, are kids going to go back to school? Is your kid distance learn? You and I made the conscious decision that we weren't going to dig in deep into that because everybody's living it, right? So, and that instead we wanted to focus on some practical strategies. So everybody leaves tonight with a little bit more tools in their toolbox for how to sort of muddle along. And so our plan for tonight is we're going to discuss the core topic of communication and how to communicate well with teens. And then we're going to go through some skills that you think if we can flex our muscles on these few skills, which you'll dive into a little deeper, everybody will leave with more feeling a little bit more confident that they have the impact that you spoke about in the previous slide. And then the Q&A chat is open, and we want absolutely to wrap up in time to really take questions from people who are watching. So nice to have everybody joining us. So I think we said we were going to talk about communication next.
Yeah, I think one thing parents should remember is you don't have to be perfect at this. And there's lots of evidence, I'm sure it's true in your experience as well, is if an individual has family support, they can get through almost anything. And so whether you think of yourself as a good communicator or not, you need to know that just plain support, I've got your back, you can do this, is extremely important. But then we come to like specific communication with teens.
So are there strategies? What should I avoid doing? Well, I know some of them because my kids will tell me.
We could bring them in, but maybe
no.
The first is, again, of what not to do is try not to lecture. Okay, so your teenager comes home and says, I went to a party and everybody was doing drugs, but I stayed anyway. And I smoked a little marijuana, whatever. And you want to say, are you kidding? Right. And you want to lecture them as to what all the things that it could go wrong and what about substances, blah, blah, blah. That's going to shut down communication immediately because they see that you're aroused and they turn off. And so even though we have tendencies to do that, we want to not lecture. Another thing is to try to be as direct as possible because kids will pick up hypocrisy or indirect communication, teens like that. And so a simple statement, I'm concerned about X, or tell me about X. So try to be direct. And the other thing to do, I think, is model direct behavior at home because they observe, I write in the book, they're like Santa Claus. They see you when you're sleeping, they know everything. So everything you model, and that's one of the premises of the book when we come to skills, is we need to learn these skills as well. I know I'm in an ongoing process of learning communication skills, and that's something we want to do with our children. And the other thing not to do, I think, is particularly if you have family members and your teenager comes to you and says, oh, I'm having trouble with X. Try not to say cousin Susie's okay with that. Just don't do comparisons. This is a bit of a tangent, but one of the problems for girls that they are constantly in the teenage years doing social comparisons, especially about body image. We can talk about social media lately. So try not, even though, it may be accurate, try not to make comparisons between siblings or with other family members.
Yeah, a new saying in our house is no one wins a one-up. Everybody's calling each other out on that one, a lot because you don't want to, it's like it feels like a pile on then, I think, right?
Yeah.
Any other tips for the ways to do it right?
Yeah, I think one of the things is to try to validate what they're saying. So what you want to do is listen. And the key is to try to get teenagers talking. And so you can listen. And then by listen, I mean actively listening, ask follow-up questions, and also validate in the sense that, oh, I get it. You feel this way. That makes a whole lot of sense. So You were bullied at school. Yeah, that's really hard. Let's talk more about that, because there's an example of where your own emotions as a parent could get in the way. And you want to pick up the phone and call that parent and call that teacher and say, that's not a good idea, by the way, because parents of bullies are not responsive. But also you want to hear more from them, because we want to check our own emotions. They may feel very differently. I give an example in the book of a mother who was reaching out to her daughter because the daughter seemed stressed and she didn't want to go take the SATs, and the mother started talking about, well, I know the SATs are difficult when I took them, blah, blah, blah. But the daughter was open enough to say to her mom, that's not it. I'm going to see my ex-boyfriend tomorrow morning, and that's what I'm worried about. So you want to validate what they say and understand what they're saying rather than projecting onto them our issues.
Yeah, I think one of the other things is it is a skill to sort of listen to what what they're really trying to tell you, right? And and we jump to our own, like you said, you feed your anxieties about what they might have going on when that's totally not what is going on. Yep. So we grabbed this picture because we thought it was a great example of, distract them and then they'll tell you anything, right? So if you've got them in the car, if you've got, if you're doing an activity together, you get all the juicy stuff instead of like let's sit down and have a talk now. You wanted to, shall we show them the example of what not to do?
The video?
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is the movie 8th Grade, which I recommend to everyone.
You hear it?
Uh-huh. I said one more week of 8th grade, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, huh?
I can't believe you're going to be in high school.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen?
Oh.
You excited?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I'm very excited. I'm so excited. Hey, I got an email from Mrs. Graves.
Huh?
I got an email from Mrs. Graves. It said you're going to go to Kennedy's birthday thing tomorrow?
No.
Really?
Yeah, no.
That sounded kind of fun.
Kennedy doesn't like me.
That can't be true.
Cool.
Sometimes kids act like they don't like you, but it's really just because they got their own stuff going on and they don't. Kayla. Kayla.
Are you kidding me right now?
Just being funny.
Dad, no, it's not funny. You're the only one that thinks it's funny.
You think I'm funny?
Dad, it's a Friday. You said I can do whatever I want on Fridays, and right now you're...
Okay, you're right. Okay, I did. All right. Can I say one thing, though? And you go back to your phone. I'll leave you alone. I just want to say one thing.
Fine.
Okay, but you have to let me finish saying it.
Yeah, I will. I'm not even...
You can't get angry before I finish saying it, otherwise you won't listen, okay?
Fine, just say it.
All right, okay. Okay.
Are you gonna say it?
I'm thinking. I think you're so cool.
So yeah, that's what don't do that.
Yeah, let's pick this apart, because I think all of us probably relate to the father who's doing his best. Just to back up, so this is 8th Grade, a wonderful movie directed by Bo Burnham, and those are Elsie Fisher and Josh Hamilton. She is so great that it made me very uncomfortable, because she's a young girl with social phobia. And you can also see in this movie how social phobia often precedes depression in teens, and he's a single father. So he's told her that on Fridays she can do what she wants, including having the phone. But then he wants to talk to her. And so the first thing is, obviously she doesn't feel like talking, but it's okay to give it a couple tries, but he mimicked her. That was like not the greatest. Yeah, right. Usually when you throw bread at your kid, you've lost control of the situation. So he was sort of giving up at that point. And also, I don't know if she would have told him, but guess what? Kennedy didn't like her. And you could see that in an earlier part of the movie. And so he was trying to sort of, and it probably breaks his heart that she was unhappy, but he was trying to validate something that wasn't true. So all that shows how it can go awry. And this is a beautiful movie because one of the other points I want to make is that we make mistakes. And later in the movie, they have a much more beautiful conversation, and he acknowledged that he makes mistakes now and then. He's trying his best.
Yeah, there is redemption in that movie, and the joke that I say to my kids is I make 200 decisions a day about you, and if 101 of them I do right, I'm going, I'm ahead. But I do think that, yeah, we misstep, and you can think a parent can think something's funny that just hits the right soft spot.
I want to mention is that in that movie, it was Friday, so she got to keep the phone at dinner, but obviously we wouldn't want that most of the time. That's especially, by the way, if your parents are on their phones during dinner all the time, then the teens are going to do the same thing.
Right. I agree that they see what we do more than what we say, right? I think that's pretty resonates at my house, certainly.
You can't always get them to talk. And so this is traditional sex roles, a lot of boys, but some girls as well. If you, as Katie said, there's even a New Yorker cartoon, it's related more to men and women. And you see the man yelling, "Oh no, not the talk, anything but the talk." And that's how kids feel. So you have your moments and choose your moments. So you might be cooking together, you might be building something. Often if you ask a teen for their help or their advice, for example, with computers about which we know so little, then you take your moment then and sort of, yeah, so how was this today? And I think that works better. So you can be activities based as well as verbally based.
Yeah. I'm always amazed too how much they'll circle back to something 3 days later, and you think a case closed sort of, and then it comes up again. And I also agree with the helping thing, because I think I've been really heard lots of people talking about how their kids, when COVID geared up and people did need more help with all kinds of things around the house, and just that the kids were eager to be, especially in this age group, eager to be seen as competent and people who could, this is a stressful time and we are going to need your help, and they rise to the occasion, which is, or giving them the chance to succeed that way is kind of neat.
Yeah, I think too, they're on the way to adulthood. So if they have this adult skill of, oh, I have this thing I know how to do, let me help my family, that's great preparation.
Yeah. So we were going to talk next about family, if I can get off of here. Yeah, that parents are different too, right?
Yeah. So there's been some research on parenting styles, and I think there are three kinds that they've identified. Originally, it was Diana Baumrind. One is the authoritarian family style, which is the parents are in a hierarchy. They tell the child what to do. They're rigid about it, and they're very fixed in terms of behavior. I'll come back to that. The laissez-faire parent basically lets the kid run the show, and also basically has very few limits. And some parents rationalize this as I'm helping them, become who they are, which that part is important. And then the third kind is the authoritative kind, where parents will give advice and modeling, but help the teens come to their own decisions. So the evidence is that that's the most effective style, but more than that, each has pluses and minuses, but the authoritarian, rigid, step one, step two down style tends to be destructive, because again, the teens are trying to come into their own. And then if you push them that hard, they have two choices. They become repressed and choose things that they didn't want, and they're unhappy later. And I've seen a lot of that. Or they rebel, and then you get the exact opposite of what you want. Sometimes the laissez-faire style isn't destructive. The problem there is navigating adolescence. So for example, if you're not monitoring your child in some way, and especially I've seen some families where there's too much money, not enough supervision, and too much time, that can often lead to risk-taking behaviors, including substance abuse. So we try to be more in the authoritative style.
Yeah, can you talk about a little bit about, there's parents who I think they don't want to disappoint their kids. Their style is like, they just want to do everything for them, or they want them to be happy and not have to suffer disappointment. It's sort of my kid is my friend, a little bit of that stuff I see sometimes.
Yeah, that's also an issue of boundaries. There are some times when we have to say no, and I think that's when you remember that you're a parent and you're not a friend. And we'll come to the other part in terms of distress tolerance. But I think the idea that you have to say yes to make them happy will not work in the long run, although I certainly understand the tendency. But boundaries are really important in terms of rules at home and consequences. And again, if you don't have boundaries, you're setting them up for problems in the larger community.
So we were gonna next go to skill building. So I'm ready. I feel like I should get my notebook out, and because I want to have my parenting toolbox full. And so I'm really excited. We're gonna talk about these different aspects of stuff we can really work on in ourselves, that where it's going back to what you're saying before. We're modeling it for them, but we're also doing things for us so that the whole family group is getting this these skills. So the first one was parental self-care and self-reflection.
So people often give advice, and then at the end they say, oh, and take care of yourself. And it might even be, if you're a mother, oh, go get a manicure or whatever. First of all, we can't do those things now anyway. But what I mean is finding time to replenish yourself, because parenting is the best and the worst of all worlds. And there are days when you're struggling at work, you're struggling at home, the kids are struggling at school. And so find some way. To me, the best way tends to be social support, but it can be other things, exercise for some people. But you need to find your way. And if you have a partner, you need to ask him or her. Let's each take a 20-minute break. If you're a single mom, as many moms are, try to work it out with a friend. But we all need to be replenished, or we won't be able to do the job. And once again, in terms of modeling, you don't really want your children to see that being a parent is just constant stress. So that's the part about self-care. The other part is self-reflection. And that's the ability, we've already talked about it, to think about the ways you're interacting with your teen. And if that's the way you want to be, take a moment. And also, this often involves family of origin, that if we have had wounds from the past that are unhealed, we need to try to be very careful not to push them. An example I give in the book of a mother who was completely worried that her daughter wasn't dating. Well, her daughter was young for her age. She wasn't interested in that. And she had a strong group of friends. She was doing well at school, but the mother had pressure when she was young from her mother, which, by the way, led her to marry someone that she shouldn't have married. And so it's really important to try and look at those things.
Right. There's this intergenerational, you can pass your stuff down, right? I think.
Right. Even when you're not aware of it. And so I
Sure.
think it's good to take a few minutes every day, if you can, to do that. And also, in terms of self-reflection, you can often talk to your siblings about what was going on and how they're coping with it.
Yeah, I like that. Anything else you want to say about self-care, or should we move on to the next?
One more thing. Mothers. Hi, mothers, and to fathers who are taking major roles. Mothers are getting slammed in the pandemic. And even McKinsey, which is not exactly a radical group, is referring to the economic crisis we're in as a she-cession, because so many women lost their jobs in the first round of this. And even the last report, women are losing their jobs left and right because they're in the industries where that happens. At the same time, mothers who are employed and can work at home, I wrote a series of blogs for Psychology Today about this, are now working 3 shifts. So you have your work, you have your household chores and cooking and just dealing with your kids. And now you have education. As you said, Katie, oh, they're in school. No, they're home. No, it's hybrid. And it's the mothers who are taking responsibility for this education. And so the rate of distress of mothers because of the pandemic is about 3 times that of fathers. And interestingly, fathers at the beginning of the pandemic who worked at home felt less stress and mothers felt more.
Yeah, and I've said many times during this past year, oh my goodness, thank goodness I don't have little ones at home that I had to be starting their videos and so forth. But I do think that when they're older, you feel like the stakes are high, you don't know what's going to happen, you're making big decisions, the decisions are big.
Yeah.
And the printer still doesn't work, or even when I'm working, you're still troubleshooting.
Right.
So this next bullet is dear to my heart. Where is it? Come on, PowerPoint. Ah, there we go. Distress tolerance and self-regulation. So
it's very natural for us as parents to want to protect our children from sad feelings, angry feelings, disappointment. But the more, and obviously there are times when you want to do that, but we can't protect them for everything. And we have to start preparing them along the way to understand that they can live through stress, that the emotions will pass, and that it's something that's part of life and it's good for them to learn to manage. And you might have suggestions as to how to manage it, for everything from things like, meditation or journaling, or talking it through, but that distress will go away and it doesn't have to be clamped down, because what you do is if you solve it every time, they're not going to learn the problem solving skills. And so that's extremely important. It's something I had to learn as a parent of a young child, that you can't fix everything and you shouldn't fix everything.
yeah. So the thing, I'm like Charlie Brown kicking the checkerboard when we are late for things.
Mm-hmm.
And then my MO is, do you think this is fun for me? Yeah, this is a minivan, not a rocket ship. Like I say, really, if we brought the boys in here, they would say, no, those are true items that come out of her mouth. Like, what do you have any advice for me and my distress talk? When it's 7:01 a.m. and jazz band started a minute ago and we live more than -1 minute from the school. Like, what do I do to not blow my stack?
Well, I think, what's the word? Perspective taking could help you, because if they're late for jazz, they're late for jazz. Now, if you have to get to work, that's another story, because then they're affecting your schedule. But I think sometimes they have to accept the consequences. And my guess is, depending on their teachers and coaches and stuff, they will get into trouble themselves. And then, of course, the thing to do is at other times sit down and say, look, we're going to have to change the morning schedule. It's hard for me. I know you don't want to get up, something you'll tell us about in a bit, but I don't want to go on this way. I'm sure you don't want me to screaming at you in the morning.
Oh, I try really hard not to scream, but the button it pushes for me is I'm the one doing things at the last. They learned it. They learned. Do you remember that there was like an old drug and smoking cessation commercial that was like, where did you learn to smoke cigarettes? I learned it from you, Dad. So I think part of why it pushes the button is it's something in our house. It's a thing I don't like about myself. And then when I see them do it, I'm like,
I think that's always true, that when it's our stuff, we feel more.
Oh my gosh, that is so, yeah, I'm Charlie Brown in this picture.
But the other thing is I don't know what's up with your kids, but we want them to learn to self-regulate, because I've often seen students whose mom was waking them up in the morning senior year to go to school. Now you can talk about the sleep part of that, but how are they going to do if their mom is still doing that? So we want to gradually help them regulate sleep, exercise, and food so that they can internalize it along the way.
Right. Yes. Major accomplishment is one of my kids makes breakfast for himself every morning. And, the words came out of his mouth. I really don't feel as good if I don't eat anything. And I was like,
Oh,
thank goodness. So, all right. Next skill. So distress tolerance and sort of them knowing what they need. Right.
right.
Like
right.
that, they have to internally know what their needs are.
That's a really good point, because there's a saying which is every emotion expresses a need, and if they're just screaming and not able to talk about it, then you're not going to find out what's really going on. I think that this is a moment for you just to tell a brief bit about sleep regulation. Could you do that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, teenagers need sleep, and they need it into their 20s, right? So we know the brain is, continuing to develop into the mid-20s, and we think that most young adults need probably between 8 and 10 hours, and we know that they don't get it. And it puts them at increased risk for lots of different things, their emotional regulation, being, cognitive functioning, actual physical ailments, so associated with obesity, impulse control. There's I don't know if we have California people on the call, but California passed a rule that they're going to delay school start times for secondary schools for the whole state, I think by 2023, and it's going to be 8:30. The fact that so many students are now, learning from home and don't have those commutes and be at the bus stop early, we're having this big natural experiment go on, right, Carol?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. Just really quickly about sleep regulation, my students don't get the sleep that they need. My recommendation is always for them to be getting their core sleep at night, and to really avoid sleeping in on days off way past when they have to get up the rest of the time. So it is better for kids to take a nap. It is actually probably better for them to have a little bit less sleep one night and then go to bed earlier the next night than it is to, sleep past more than an hour past their usual wake time, because the whole body clock will shift.
Yeah.
So yeah, that the sleep is totally an important thing with them. And school start times, I think, is a public policy, making those healthy school start times instead of ones where kids are on the bus when it's still dark. But that's a big topic. But moving on. Self-efficacy. So you're going to teach us to feel this like this little guy, and you're going to teach us to have our kids feel like this. Yes?
I think that I love that you've got.
I love him too. He's probably a teenager now.
Right. I think, psychologists call it agency or self-efficacy, but basically it's such a great feeling to know I can do this. I can work hard. I can master this. So then the question is, what is this? And unfortunately, for lots of teens, school is not this, and they spend most of their lives there. And so they end up not feeling that sense of agency that they can do things. So as parents, I think the best thing we can do then is help them find their way towards something they're passionate about, something they're motivated for, and it might be outside of school. Encourage them there so they still get that feeling, even if it's not school. And so I think that's a great feeling. And for parents, I think it's not only feeling it yourself, but also telling them that you think it's important. Hey, maybe math is really hard for you, but you're really fantastic at music, and look at how well you're doing practicing. So it's important to verbalize that.
Yeah, my teenagers definitely talk about feeling like they're really pushed, and that they have friends. Hopefully I'm not. I get pushback from them, but that their peers feel really pushed into certain decisions and expectations from parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and so we have to try not to live out our stuff through them, I think. Yeah.
I also think the other thing is, again, modeling. And unfortunately, the example I have is control over weight and body image. So if you're trying to raise either a boy or a girl, but a girl in particular, to feel good about her body, and you're saying all the right things, but if she sees you fasting and criticizing yourself all the time, that's an area where you need to have more self-efficacy and confidence so that, they can too.
And your own distress tolerance, right? It's
Yeah.
not every thought about how you look in that outfit needs to be shared with your teenage daughter, right?
I think there was a play written called "You're Wearing That." There's a whole play.
Oh gosh, you didn't tell me we were going to talk about that. Trigger warning. All right. Let's talk about social support. So I'll share that one of the best things I've done this year is one of my close friends and I have done a social distance walk every Sunday. I'm like, I'm going to church, and right, because we feel good and we bundle up if it's cold. And that has been a huge new thing that I've added that has been great social support. Can you talk about why that I feel so good after we get our
First
walk
of
on
all,
Sundays?
you are evidence of a tremendous amount of research that doesn't get emphasized enough because it's not clever and it's not medication. And that is, social support helps everything. It helps you as a parent. It'll help your teen. It helps people do exercise. It helps them read more. So social support's the most important thing. But how do we get it? Like right now, it's hard. You found a creative way. I've been Zooming more with my friends and family. And I think we need to encourage our teens to do the same, especially because right now, teens find their way in who they are through interaction. And now that interaction's been cut short, both at school and outside of school. So I think it's really important. And the other thing is to be able to accept and identify different kinds of social support. Example, your teen may have a friend who's great at listening and they have a lot in common. And so they get that really good feeling of connection, which we're also losing. So that's great. But they may have another friend who's a buddy that they can play video games with or shop with or talk books about. And it's okay to accept all different kinds of social support. But I think this is one of the most important things of tonight for us and for them. I think it's like the nutrient of our development.
Yeah, and I think that's why why COVID has been so hard for so many people is the interactions have been limited, but even though we have these great technologies, it ain't what it used to be. I'm sure we all find ourselves like, you're gabbing too much with like the person you're paying for the gas at the car station, gas station, and you're like, all right.
Yeah.
It's just that I don't get to hang out with people.
Sorry, I'm desperate.
Right. Oh gosh. And then you've done a whole hour on perfectionism for our Women in Medicine and Science group. But I love this topic, right? Because it could always be better, couldn't it, Carol?
Absolutely. And why didn't
it couldn't
make it better? Maladaptive perfectionism is a combination of very high standards, often slightly unattainable, and working so hard, but you're going to fail because they're unattainable. And most importantly, concern about evaluation and a self-evaluation really, that you aren't going to measure up, and it's harsh and critical. That's a bad combination. And you and I, Katie, talked another time that if parents are perfectionistic, that's going to be hard. And that affects kids, especially those applying to college, that we push them in ways that may not be the healthiest for them because of our needs. I mean, I just can't stand those conversations in high school. Where are you applying? Where are you applying? And those are parents talking to each other. Those
right.
are kids.
Right. Yeah, no, it's really interesting that it's such a fine line between getting totally aggravated by their grades, which, by the way, now we can look them up. You know this, right? Mm-hmm. That we have access to them. I can log in and see every assignment. That I've been really backed off of that this year. It used to make me a little too crazy. Mm-hmm. And even if I didn't talk to the kids about it, A, I felt crazy, and B, then they would make themselves crazy by checking it all the time. Nobody's winning, right? And it's like, I'm pretty sure nobody's life was determined by what they got on their 9th grade Spanish test,
And
right? Like these are the conversations that we try to have at my house.
And in fact, nobody's life will be ruined by going to X college rather than Y college, except, by the way, for first generation college students who tend to do better when they're in slightly more elite schools because of the social networking that they didn't have before. But in general, and a lot of people have written about this as well. And in fact, this leads to high achieving schools. And it turns out that the high achieving schools, which market themselves that way, we get our kids into X, Y, and Z college, those students are less mentally healthy than regular schools, which makes sense because it's sort of a cauldron of tension.
Oh yeah, I remember. I mean, there are spates of suicide. I think somewhere out in Northern California, they had a real problem with kids just feeling so much pressure and cracking under the pressure. Which is great. The great film about that, The Race to Nowhere, which really is, I think, a great film about that. I like your alternative, adaptive perfectionism.
Yeah, let's do this briefly so we can get questions. But
yeah, I know, I'm psyched.
Adaptive perfectionism is you have the same high standards, but you don't apply them universally, and you're not that rigidly self-critical. And I'll end with one of the things I learned at an early Office of Women in Medicine seminar, which my friends and I quote often, which is, not everything worth doing is worth doing perfectly.
Right.
My particular choice is dusting. If it gets done ever, that's fine.
Good enough. All right. So we reviewed these skills. I think, do you want to take questions, or you want to return to this at the end, or you want to go through this?
Let's do the questions.
Great. All right. I'm going to stop this because there's a couple great questions. We'll take some more if you guys, people in the audience, want to send them in. The first one says, can you chat about anything you are seeing, especially with new college students? This group was hit hard in spring 2020 with loss of graduation rituals from high school, and are now adjusting to a college experience that's so different from what they were expecting. How do you keep an eye on them when they're remote? What about parents whose children have already made the transition from high school to college, but it looks so different than they thought it would?
Yeah, thanks for that question. First of all, even before we get to the new college students, just think briefly of what it takes to adjust to college. Often you're moving away from home, your schedule's different, you have to self-regulate, you're meeting new people, you have to live with somebody in a room often. All these things are challenges psychologically that require a great deal of adaptation. And this group, I just have to say, it's a disaster. Everybody's trying as hard as they can, and I'm impressed by the resilience, but from the families I've talked to, it's like, should they go back? Should they not go back? And I think that keeping in touch, it just puts more pressure on us as parents, but I think we have to stay in touch as much as possible. Let them choose the methodology. I think a lot of kids are comfortable texting, especially while they're walking, or Zooming now and then. And I think that not so much advising them as listening and trying to stay on top of what the school's expecting. So I think it's a very, very difficult time because all those challenges I just mentioned are getting delayed because you're living alone, or because you just met new friends and then you had to go back home. So it's really a tough time.
Yeah. So there's another question here talking about college students and strategies for talking to students who are in college and away at college to help them feel comfortable about what's worrying them. Entryways into the conversation.
Okay.
So sort of if you're trying to help or offer that support, how do you?
Yeah, first thing I would do is normalize it, sort of say, I read in the paper, or I talked to somebody, not somebody they know, and it turns out a lot of kids are worrying. I'd be pretty direct. I'm sure you have some worries. Can you tell me what they are? So I try to be as direct as possible. But again, you're saying they're not very comfortable. And so then you might have to start out with the activities, like talking about what they've been doing and how that's been going. So I think, again, especially, let's say you try 2 or 3 times and your college student says no, or blah, blah, blah. You can always end it with, you know what? If you ever feel like talking, I would love to hear about it. All right, so worst case, they grow up and they think, oh, my parents wanted me to talk about my feelings. No, that could be worse.
Yeah. Right. And I do think, boy, you have to send that invitation a lot of times sometimes. I mean, and I think this person was especially getting at, they're not the parent, but, trying to be a safe adult for other youngsters.
Oh boy, parents have a lot to offer, but so do other family members, relatives, coaches, teachers. I talked to lots and lots of kids, and the formative relationship during this period was either with a faculty member, a coach, or a mentor in a community activity. So I think that's extremely valuable and makes all the difference. So it's not just the parents. I'm glad that came up.
Yeah. The next question I think is really important. So what signs should we be looking for in students? So with COVID, there have been universities where they've isolated so every kid who used to have a roommate now is in a single, and they are not sort of getting the same sort of interaction that they had. So can you talk specifically in this age group of what might be signs or symptoms of depression and anxiety, especially given social constraints?
Okay. Let's start with depression. So depression in this age group is the first symptom is either sadness, but also lack of interest. So the kid who says, oh, nothing matters anymore, that's a particular sign. And then for clinical depression, then you would need 2 weeks where the functioning's changed dramatically. So if all of a sudden you're talking to a student and they're saying, well, I stopped going to class, or I can't get it together to go to sports. So a change in functioning that lasts for 2 weeks, and then a bunch of other symptoms like sleep disturbance, appetite.
And that can be appetite, that can be weight loss or weight gain, right? I mean,
eating too much or too little, right? Feeling like you just can't get going, and thoughts of suicide, which we need to pay attention to because it's the second leading cause of death in this age group. The first is accidents. I think that those are some of the signs, and we have a whole section in the book, but I do want to mention it to you. Every university has somebody who can help you with your kid, and it's often a dean or counseling and psychological services. And I wouldn't hesitate to first encourage your student to try and go there. If you have any doubts, try it. Or when they come home, again, I think we have to get over shame and have earlier rather than later intervention. And the other thing would be a sudden withdrawal, that here's a kid who's often pretty chatty with you, but all of a sudden isn't talking. I would be concerned about that.
Yeah, to me, the sort of somebody's they don't all of a sudden don't have anything that they're interested in, like you said, especially when the world has opened up to them and they're in, even in its constricted setting, college is still pretty cool, right? And so if they're not excited by anything, I think that's a sign.
Anxiety briefly is a little clearer, because anxiety is worry and it doesn't end. And then there are different kinds of anxieties, such as social anxiety, and then there might be specific phobias, or generalized anxiety, which can be quite debilitating because then they're worried about everything. So that's a little easier to find, and that again can respond to cognitive behavior therapy as depression can as well. And I do think it's probably good to encourage parents to talk to their students more rather than less. But the other thing is help them, because somebody's mentioned here they're in singles. Try to identify one potential friend, because that can really get them through it. And again, it's a challenge in the given situation now.
Yeah. What about the child who will confess to you that they are struggling but then they're frightened or resistant to seeking help. I think that's super common, right? Like
Yeah.
they know they're not good,
Yep.
and yet the inertia or shame or I don't know what you name your barrier, but they're really resistant or frightened about what will happen.
It's true for a lot of students, this especially, I think not so much in college, but in the teen years, students are, boys are 60% of them refuse treatment the first time. So the first thing to remember is that it's an ongoing conversation, whether you're a parent or a healthcare provider who is not a therapist. I think you just say, here are some ideas. I want you to think about it. I want you to call me, text me, come back and let me know. And then you also want to ask, well, what are the barriers? And if the barriers are shame, you need to go right at it. Although, by the way, this generation is a lot less ashamed than previous ones, which is great. But you want to have an ongoing conversation. And then, you don't ask people to do what they're not ready to do. So if they say, no, I don't feel like it, you say, hey, before I talk to you next, why don't you just go look at the website? Tell me what you think. Look at what services are available. And so it's a step-by-step process.
Yeah. I think that there's a couple more questions, but I think that in the interest of time, I'm going to share these with Dr. Landau later. And I know I want to put up these last couple slides so we can close out here. But those are great and really helpful to this conversation.
While you're doing that, let me say real quickly,
Yep.
Absolutely limit internet use when they're at home, especially the girls on social media. There's a
right.
distinct correlation between too much time and intensity on comparative social media for girls that leads to depression. So I would say that. I think what we want to do is give it our best shot, and remembering that this particular period in American history is historic and tragic. And I think giving them context that we've all been through hard times before, we'll be through hard times now. This is particularly bad, and they will remember what you have said to them. And now I don't see the quote, but I have it.
Here it is.
I have it here, yes. Please let my home be a space where the world's not on my shoulders. Let your conversations encourage me with optimism and reminders that no matter what, I will do great things with the rest of my life. Join me in escaping the pressure. And that's a very current quote.
Right, from a teenager who is living in these times and really, I think, is seeking a home to be a safe haven.
Yep.
So I know, Carol, you said we're right at 8.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy to, I want to be respectful of people's time. I'm happy to keep reading questions. And I know you'd said that you'd be willing to take keep more of them, but I also wanted to get to our time. So I'll read some more and people are welcome to stay on and listen. Is that what you said? Is that
Absolutely.
Still good?
They won't be interrupting anyone if they leave now.
Right, yeah. So I love this. How do you deal with students who don't know what they want to be, and how often is this a problem? And I think that's so great, right? With college-bound teens, like there's this pressure. Well, do they have a good program at blah, blah, blah university for anthropology? And you're like,
I kind of think that's a good thing. If you don't know what you want to be, and what you want to do then is, if you're in direct contact, expose them, or indirect tell them about exposing wide range of different options. Carpentry, film, nursing. I think another thing where parents get in the way, and maybe all of us really, is that we have this commitment to a 4-year education followed by graduate school of professionalism. Well, not every kid is good for that. Maybe they want a community college degree that's going to help them get a job right away. Maybe they want music or art. And I've seen a number of students who are sort of pushed into a kind of more elite liberal arts school when that's not what they wanted. But I think that quote also gets at something. If you are a mentor, close contact with a student, you just say, you know what, I know that you have motivation and you're smart, and then fill in the blank carefully, and that ultimately you're going to be great at whatever you do. So it's exposure to a wide range and get our feelings out of the way.
Yeah, one of my kids and I had a conversation about this the other day, you know, a kid who's being pressured to go to law school, and he wants to run an auto mechanic business. And, you know, and that's a lot to shoulder, right? When you're a teenager.
Yeah, and think about the social pressure all around. It's not
Sure.
just.
Okay. What are the pros and cons of checking your high schoolers' grades online?
Well, you sort of addressed that. I think unless you see evidence of trouble, I might not check it unless you talk to them about it and do it together. Now, on the other hand, if you're getting messages that they're flunking out, then you say, you know what, I really want to support your independence, but right now we're in a problem, so I'm going to have to check this out. I think peeking every now and then is a terrible idea because everybody has a bad day. So you might happen to log in on a day when—
Oh no, you can see back forever. Yeah. It's like,
what do you think?
Remember the old saying, it's gonna go in your permanent record? This is that.
And your mom can see it.
This is that. Oh my goodness. You know what? Sometimes I look less than I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And but maybe it's as they're a little bit old, you know, middle school, I looked all the time because we had this problem at my house called, not only do you have to do the homework, but you have to turn it in. And, but that's, yeah, as they've gotten older and they've had they have agency and they know, you know, I've done 11th grade already. Mm-hmm. I check less. So but I also, sometimes I see them obsessively checking and then I have to be like, dude, that's when I'm having the conversation that goes, no one cares about your, you know, 10th grade geometry quiz.
Yep.
I feel like I cut off the screen time and internet use question because I was trying to make an hour exactly an hour. Do you want, I think you wanted to say more about screen time and internet and navigating that.
Gives me the opportunity of talking a little bit about decisional balance, but I do feel strongly that when girls are younger, you should limit it if you can, right? If you give them the phone and let them go off, you won't because of the damage in terms of depression. Boys, less so, although they are likely to more get into the world of video games to the neglect of other things. And the other interesting thing is 93%, if I have it right, boys of high school age have been watching pornography at least once. Sorry. And that, apart from, the yuck factor, gives them a totally—
yeah, it's unrealistic and
unbalanced, misogynist usually. But if you have a child with whom you can talk, you say, you know, let's look at the pros and cons of this, right? You're on too much. How are you feeling about yourself? Because girls often reach out on social media to feel better, but guess what? They end up feeling worse. And so that's one thing. And I'm going to let you decide how to talk to boys about pornography because—
oh gosh, you should. I have that conversation. I mean, we've talked about that and that it isn't realistic and that everything's airbrushed. And, you know, what's interesting, I mean, I feel like the young ladies, the young women that my kids know, the girls that my kids know are definitely empowered girls who aren't, they're not, I don't think that they put up with very much. At least the girls that my sons are associated with are not. Yeah, they're doing okay. And
first of all,
I don't have a great answer. I mean,
no, but we give mom and dad credit for that, by the way.
Yeah.
Got to take the good with the bad. But also, I think the other thing this brings up for both boys and girls is online bullying. so that many kids are bullied online now, which is even worse than at school because there's no accountability. And so I think, again, you might say, let's look at the things that can happen on the internet that are good, that are not so good. But again, I would have limits on it to the extent that I could.
I love this one. So it's limbo. How do you help your student handle the period between when they apply to college and then those acceptances and rejections start coming in? Oh my goodness.
In between.
So Facebook and all the Instagrams and all their social media should just be closed for that during that time, right? It's like, you know, the gender reveal parties. It's like the college reveal.
This is
Cringy.
distress tolerance. This is uncertainty. And so I think the thing there is what we've said before, which is try to support them and try to involve in this. We haven't mentioned yet, distraction is a great thing. Find anything that they love or you love to just take their mind off it, because it really is difficult. And then support, you know, whatever you get into, you're going to be okay. But it's a tough time, especially when some kids start, you know, bragging.
Yeah, I liken this to when medical students go through trying to go through the match, right? It's that other time period where they just have their sights set on this one thing and they have their heart set on it. And it's sort of like, you have to keep reminding people, you're gonna thrive because of you, not because you're gonna succeed because of you. And there's gonna be somebody for you at every place that's gonna capture what you're great with. Or yeah, we do a lot of, I'm really trying to get my guys to not think that there's one and only place. Right. Especially because I don't want them to move to California where my husband's family's there. So they all want to go to California. I'm like, that's too many time zones away for this mama. But anyway, I love this next question. And it was one that Carol, you and I talked about, which is gay and lesbian students who are transitioning, and especially when their family doesn't know. So I think that's very common from the high school to college.
Grateful for that question.
Yeah, me too.
When we talked about social support and parental support, it's probably never more important than with LGBTQ plus students, because there's ample evidence that the students whose parents accept them go on to do well, and the students whose parents who don't have very serious difficulties. They're already at risk for greater depression and to a lesser extent, but also anxiety, because they're a social minority. And because 55% of those students express hearing adults at school make homophobic remarks and are subject to bullying and so on. So I've done a lot of this, and basically it's a step-by-step process. You know, who are they out to? Are they out to their friends? Are they getting support? What are their worst fears about their parents? And then we try and talk through that. And I have to say, most parents accept over time, and some don't, and that's going to be their loss over time. But again, and this is another thing where it's not going to be one conversation with your parents.
Right.
I read about this, by the way, is Adam Shankman, who's a director of something really good. But anyway, he said his parents outed him to himself when he was 13, that they knew he was gay and they were ready to talk about it, but that doesn't usually happen.
No, what I would say, I guess the other thing that I would say is that even if families of origin are not very supportive, I think this generation of teens and 20 somethings, they are used to it all the time. It's nothing cool to them.
And ultimately what would happen in worst cases, you develop a family of choice.
Right. And I'm not saying every teenager is, because, you know, teens learn what they're exposed to, right? But so I think there are definitely going to be students at our kids and our friends' kids' college, you know, all of our kids' colleges who aren't not supportive of being gay or lesbian or trans or gendered, non-binary gender. Thank you. Sorry. But there are definitely people who will be open to it. And I think for most of them, like they don't even bat an eye. You know, the number of that just is not even a thing in my kids' world anymore.
But we're in a bubble, you know,
Yeah,
Trevor Project and other places where it's not so
fair
good.
enough.
Definitely, though, it's social progress, and we're glad for that.
Yeah. So I think that wraps up all the questions. And I just want to thank again Julie Haynes for setting this up, to Mike and Jake from Media Services, who are so great. You should own this book. If you're still watching, you should own this book. It's so good.
I think
And it's like a little Bible for getting through. It's been a year. And we were joking earlier, Carol, it's December 49th, 2020 now. Just keeps going.
Chris has posted the Brown Bookstore's offer, and I saw one question was, could I do this again sometime? And get your people to talk to my people.
I gave them I replied to that with your email address. I'm your agent now, Carol.
You and my husband, David Ames, are the best. Thank you.
I'm your agent. I sent her your email address and said, by all means, you call her. She'd be totally open to it.
How dare you?
What?
I'm teasing.
All right.
Teasing. Yes.
And they're signed? Mine's not signed.
Oh, well, there's still time.
Okay. I'll come over with my mask.
And we'll go like this.
And I'll ride on the elevator by myself and slip it in the door. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming.
Great crowd.
Stay healthy and be well.